In my neighborhood, there are people you see and wave hello to who don't really know your name. I waved to dozens of neighbors and don't know hardly any of their names either. But I knew Tom. Tom sat outside often with a book in his hand, sometimes with music playing. He loved Sinatra. Tom would stop me and ask me about this or that, and when he found out my name was Fred, he liked me even more. He started calling me Red because of my red beard. Apparently, he grew up with a couple of fellas named Red, and he said I reminded him of them. One day, I stayed talking with him for so long that he offered me a lawn chair to sit on. I did, and after that, if I had the time, I'd always pull out one of those extra lawn chairs and sit and shoot the breeze with him. I'd talk about my family and growing up, and sometimes about modern things. But Tom was old, in his mid-80s when I first became friends with him, and he would often be amazed by these modern thoughts and occurrences. I doubt Tom had cable TV or a computer, which is a shame because he had a nimble mind and when I first befriended him. He was a very smart man who would have benefited a lot from a computer and learning more about the modern world. But what Tom had couldn't be taken away, and that was a life of great stories. Stories about growing up in Brooklyn back in the 1910s and 20s, and life during the Depression, and being a hotshot lawyer in the 1940s and 50s. He was a partner in a law firm in an area that used to be bustling, but is now a slum. He worked to make sure that people weren't trying to cheat the insurance companies with false claims. His youth was fascinating in itself. He once saw an ice horse truck pull up lame in a street in Williamsburg, Brooklyn. He and his friends stood around and watched as a cop came over to assist, and eventually pulled out his gun and shot the horse in the street. But Tom wasn't upset that they killed the horse. People were less sensitive about animals back then. No, he was upset because it took the garbage men several days to come and get the rotting horse. But as an adult, he became very successful and was able to buy a summer home up in Cape Cod near the Kennedy compound. Back in the 60s, things were more gentle and quiet up there, and Tom would spend large chunks of the summer there. Being a good Catholic, one Saturday night he went to Mass at the local church. It was the same church the Kennedys went to. He was already about 50 back then, but Tom was still excited to see Bobby Kennedy sitting in the pew in front of him. It was a few people down to the right, but Tom could barely concentrate on the priest because he kept watching Bobby. I'm not sure if Bobby was Attorney General then or a Senator of New York, but Tom apparently looked up to him very much. When the sign of peace came up, Tommy turned around and shook Tom's hand. 35 years later, this moment put a big smile on the old man's face. But he didn't care too much for Teddy Kennedy. He said, Teddy Kennedy? Never liked him. He said too often Teddy would have too much to drink and be annoying. Tom got really worked up and told me this story one day. He said, one afternoon, I met some friends at a luncheonette in town. We were having a private conversation when who showed up? Teddy Kennedy. He came staggering through the door, already drunk. My friends and I were worried that he would come by us, but it was too late. Teddy saw us and decided to sit down at our table. He leaned over, and you know what he said to me? I go, what? And then Tom looked in the tree and said, what kind of bird is that? I turned around and looked, and I said it was a robin. And then I turned back to Tom and I said, so what did he say? He goes, who? I go, Teddy Kennedy. Oh, Teddy Kennedy? Never liked him. And he completely lost his train of thought. That's when I first realized that Tom was losing his memory a little. And as time wore on, he'd lose it more and more. He's now in an old age hospital, about 95, with very bad Alzheimer's. He lived with his two sisters, and they are both deceased now. He never married, and he has no other family besides a nephew. I asked a neighbor if I should visit him, and they said at this point he wouldn't know you anyway. I'm afraid of a lot of diseases, but Alzheimer's might be the scariest. Because as long as you have your memory and the ability to think, you can still do other things no matter how sick you are. Once you lose your mind, I believe it is just a living death. So follow all the recommendations. Eat lots of fish. Eat blueberries. Take omega-3 and omega-6 vitamins. And do puzzles like Sudoku. Sudoku works the problem-solving part of your brain that many of us don't use after we graduate high school. And when you are stuck in traffic, try and name your favorite team's 1985 starting lineup. Maybe it's the Celtics, in my case it's the '86 Mets. Don't look everything up. Don't Google everything. Make your brain work. It's a muscle. If you don't use it, it'll get flabby. And reading a newspaper is not enough. You have to stay in the now. I believe the more you live in the past, the further away you are from truly living. Tom is a fantastic guy, and maybe this was going to happen to him anyway. But whatever you can do to fight it off, do it. As Tom told me about his favorite baseball player, Brooklyn Dodger Hall of Famer, Zach Wheat. Give it a whack, Zach. From the Predator.